Lucas Smith of Locked On Cardinals here today. Steve Granado, Locked On Angels here in this crossover. Lucas, how you doing, man? How's the lockout treating you?
It's treating me just about how it's treating everybody else, but it has been fun coming up with interesting topics. But I'm ready to cover some actual off-season baseball. How you doing, Steve?
Yeah, I think I messed up. I hit all my big hitters in the early part of the offseason. I did them all during the playoffs, and now here we are going, uh-oh, didn't know
Yeah.
about this. Well, I mean, I did know about the lockout coming, but still, I was not fully prepared. So here we are doing a Locked On crossover. So there you go. The elephant in the room between us,
hmm
and I know this is gonna garner a ton of hate in my comments, which is why I wanted to avoid this, but it's inevitable. It's very Thanos snap here. But we got to talk Albert Pujols, man.
hmm
That situation shook out before I took over the show. I took over the show in September. So, I was just, I wouldn't even say, I tweeted about it a couple of times when it happened. I don't remember what I said, but I remember feeling like a just like disgusting feeling in my stomach about the whole situation,
hmm
about how it all ended and the things that were said and just the way it seemed outside looking in how the Angels treated Albert Pujols on his way out. It very much felt like, here are your bags, get out the door. And it just felt very wrong. I don't care so much on how his production was and what he was saying. And it just felt very wrong for baseball. How did
Yeah.
it feel as a Cardinals fan outside looking in?
It was definitely an eyebrow raiser because immediately everybody in Cardinal Nation or Cardinal fans, everybody, is a reunion possible? Can this actually happen? Is this going to get done? But yeah, it definitely felt odd because Albert Pujols, I mean, if he would have retired the day after his contract was up in St. Louis, he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. You throw in 600 career home runs and what he did with the Angels, he's obviously a Hall of Famer. So for a Hall of Famer to get the kind of, at least from the outside perspective, the kind of treatment that he did from Los Angeles or Anaheim, whatever the Angels decided to call themselves, it definitely was a shock because you didn't expect a giant like Albert Pujols to fall like that. You know, the old saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. That seems to be true, at least for Albert Pujols and the Angels' perspective. But I think that the initial reaction from me was, what is the realisticness of a reunion with Albert Pujols? And I still think that there is a realistic opportunity if Albert wants to play one more year and take a significantly diminished playing role. But the argument at the time, Steve, was that Albert Pujols was basically a better right-handed Matt Carpenter. Matt Carpenter has had an atrocious last couple of seasons after a really solid to arguably great Cardinal career. So Albert coming back to St. Louis was kind of in our pipe dreams at the time. We all know what happened as he went to the Dodger Blue. But I think that was the first reaction, was Albert going to St. Louis. And how realistic is this? You had people on both sides fighting yes and no. I was more in the no category. However, I think I was wrong looking back at it. But Albert wanted to win. And at the time of his release, it didn't look like the Cardinals were going to do that. So I don't blame Albert for going across the city to go to the Dodgers. And, you know, he didn't win a championship there, but he had some pretty big moments and a pretty deep postseason run over there in LA.
Now, this is just me getting out ahead of comments. Like, I'm not going to lie. This is me getting out ahead of comments. Because the last time I tweeted about this, I tweeted from the Locked On account during I think it was the NLDS. And the Locked On Angels timeline was just filled with hate. I mean, it was like, it was hurting me. And again, I get it. Like, I get that Albert Pujols wasn't great here. I understand that. Like, I watch baseball. I know that. I'm not an idiot. Okay, I get that. But again, like, from my perspective, it's not like the Angels have done anything during that tenure anyway. And I know people will blame
Right.
Pujols for that, but it's not all Pujols' fault. Let's be real.
Hmm.
But the hate that was filled on the Locked On Angels timeline was just so like jarring, and it really pained me. So I tweeted out, I don't get why Angels fans are actively rooting against Albert Pujols.
Mm-hmm.
And for the next 3 days, all I saw in the mentions was just the worst of baseball fandom. So I don't know if this feels like, I know this isn't your problem, Lucas. This is my problem.
I
But
want to
this
hear it
is,
out. Let's hash it out.
I
I'll hear
haven't
it out.
I never talked about it on the show. And
Well,
I
here's
probably
your
should have.
opportunity.
Yeah, now's my opportunity. It's the middle of December. So now's my opportunity.
Right. Yeah, I
I'm
think
going
it's
to be honest, and I've talked about comments a little bit here on Locked On Angels because,
mhm,
sometimes, I mean, it's the internet. But it made me feel awful as a human being. Like, for days, I felt terrible. So
mhm,
I turned off replies on that tweet because it got like 400 retweets or something, and
mhm,
people were just responding. I couldn't see anything else.
mhm,
And then I turned off replies from people who don't follow us. Then that turned into people quote tweeting it, which made it worse.
mhm.
And I wanted to stick by my guns because I'm not like, I hate Albert Pujols. Like, I don't care.
Right.
Like, I enjoyed him as a person. He did a lot for this community. He does a lot for the St. Louis community still.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So he's a good dude. Um, but anyway, I know this is just me getting out of the comments. So, hey, remember, just because it says Locked On Angels, there's still a human being running that account. Like, it's still me,
Yes,
man. So
absolutely.
I don't know. I know this is a therapy session now with Lucas, but
That's okay.
that was just
We
an
need
awful situation, man.
maybe we need to have more of these. That's a future idea for Locked On therapy sessions for future
Locked On,
use.
yeah, Locked
I
On
know that a
therapy
lot of our Locked
crossover.
On hosts could use that. Bryce Patrick comes to mind during the season of Locked On Rangers. Love you, Patrick. But I think that Angels fans and Cardinals fans, when you ask them about Albert Pujols, obviously you're going to get very different responses. Albert Pujols had arguably one of the greatest 10-season run of all time with St. Louis, goes over to the Angels with this big expectation. They signed C.J. Wilson that same offseason. You have Mike Trout coming in the wings. Maybe you didn't know that Mike Trout was going to be Mike Trout, but you still, hindsight says you had Mike Trout coming. You think playoff team, you think World Series championships, and they made one postseason berth in 10 years, in 2014, I
14.
think, I want to say. Then they got swept by the eventual World Series champion, or American League champion, Kansas City Royals. So the perspective is wildly different, right? These Cardinal fans that have been deprived of Albert Pujols for close to 10 years, outside of his reunion in 2019 with when the Angels came to St. Louis, they still think that Albert can do at least a little bit of what he did because they saw him day in and day out amaze us for 10 years. Do the unthinkable, do the improbable, win MVPs, win World Series championships. It was incredible to watch. I remember Dan McLaughlin, the play-by-play announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals, his call of Albert Pujols' home run in June of 2019 when Albert made his first return. I believe it was something to the tune of Albert gave us 11 great seasons of memories, and here's one more. He said that as the ball left into the left field bullpen in that series, and that call was spot on because it was nostalgia. It's always nostalgia. Baseball is such a history, nostalgia-like sport that, and I'll be honest, there's a part of me that wants to see Albert don the birds in the bat again. There's no question. I grew up with this guy. I was 11 years old when he left for St. Louis. I remember one day, and might be a little reverse therapy session. It was the offseason 2011. Albert had just recently signed with the Angels, and I was, again, 11 years old, and I was just sitting on the top bunk of my bed just crying. And my dad comes in and says, "What are you crying about? What's going on? Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just sad Albert left." Like, he meant something, So 10 years later, when you look back and say, "Ooh, is a reunion possible?" You really want to say yes because you really want Albert to come back and be a Cardinal and relive the glory days, if you will, of him donning the birds in the bat, because there are some great memories there, and it's unfortunate that he didn't live up to, really, in my opinion, any of the hype with the Angels. He had some nice seasons. The first one wasn't terrible to start 2012, but overall it wasn't even close. I think that what Angels fans, and you might have a little bit more insight on this, is what they can reminisce in is that he hit most of his big milestones there. 3,000 hits, 500 and 600 home runs. Most of his milestones came in an Angel uniform, which, and from my perspective, is a nice memory for Angels people to look back on.
I think the Angels fans also missed a lot of those. A lot of those happened on the road, and I think also one of them, I don't remember which one. I think it was he passed somebody. Gosh, it's all a blur. But it was during the pandemic season, so no
Hmm.
one was there. So
Yeah,
we missed a lot of those milestones. I know
that's
that
true.
either 500 or 600 happened in DC.
I think
So
five because he also hit four with the Cardinals in DC. That was his 400th home run. So 4 and 5, I think, came in DC.
So Angels fans missed a lot of it, which is a big bummer. I think Rod Carew's 3,000th came on the road too. I wasn't alive, so
Nope.
don't blame me. I think it's on the road.
Yeah, I
So
know
we've
Albert came
missed a
in
lot of
Seattle,
those.
didn't it? His 3,000th.
I
I think it was an opposite field
Yeah, that
base
sounds
hit to
right. That
Seattle. Yeah.
sounds right. And Trouty's 300th came during the pandemic season. So we've missed out on a a lot of things, which is a bummer. I think too one of Nolan Ryan's no-nos came on the road, so
A lot
we're
of
doing
pain
great
for
now.
Angels. Lot of pain in the
Yeah,
Angels
but you
in
know
the
what?
Angels history.
We won the World Series on home turf.
This is
So
true. This is
that
true
helps.
against
That's not a lot of people can say that.
Nope.
Let's move on from Pujols talk. I don't want to. Again, the comments are going to be awful, man. I'm probably just not even going to look.
Take a break in the conversation between Steve and myself because I want to tell you about this holiday season to grab a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, and that is Built Bar. You get the best of both worlds because these bars are both delicious and healthy. You have so many flavors to choose from. You're going to go with the raspberry, mint brownie, cherry, double chocolate, cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie. There's so many more to choose from at built.com. You can cozy up with something warm as well because a holiday secret for you is to dip your Built Bar into a piping hot cup of cocoa. Let it melt a little bit and give your beverage a bit of that Built Bar flavor. Plus, you'll have a nice melty Built Bar to go with it, and be sure to have a couple napkins on hand. You can also have a marshmallowy treat with Built Bar by getting your hands on some Built Bar Puffs. They're light, fluffy, and marshmallowy through and through. Different flavors, all covered in chocolate. It tastes so good you won't believe. They're filled with protein. Built.com is the place to go. Use promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off your order at Built.com. Get yourself some delicious Built Bars today.
But so let's move on. So I want to talk about another Cardinals legend that we also got a little bit taste of. This is super timely. Let's talk about David Freese. I think
Absolutely.
David Freese had a pretty darn good career here in Anaheim. Like the last time prior to Rendon, and obviously that hasn't shaken out the way that everyone has hoped for, mostly because of injuries. But that was that felt like the last solid third baseman the Angels really had. I don't know. I'm probably missing somebody in there, but I know that Cardinals fans very clearly have a great memory of David Freese.
Yeah, and that was 10 years ago this season. He was able to come back and celebrate. There was a book
That's
written
right.
about it that was really awesome to read by Benjamin Hockman. Little soft plug. He was on my show, so I feel like he's a great dude and it was a great book. So if 11 and 11 is the book if you want to read it. But yeah, David Freese, obviously. I mean, hometown kid, NLCS MVP, World Series MVP, the heroics in Game 6 and really Game 7, the RBI double in the first inning. Just unbelievable. And even after that, in 2012, he had a really solid season. In 13, he got off to a slow start, which is, in my opinion, what led to his trade. But he was somebody that was really soft-spoken, really quiet, and just went out there and tried to do his job and do his job to the best of his ability. And he is going to be remembered in St. Louis forever. Like there's no question about it. He's, in my opinion, one day going to be in the Cardinal Hall of Fame, not the Cooperstown Hall of Fame, mind you, the Cardinal Hall of Fame, the team Hall of Fame. And when he got traded, I think that was the first real moment of, 2011 was 3 years ago. At the time, I think he got traded in the offseason of 13 going into 14, if memory serves me correct. But it was like, that's like really the path. It's time to move on now. And at that point, Matt Carpenter then shifted over to becoming the third baseman. But when that trade happened, that trade shocked me more than the Alan Craig trade shocked me that year. Because again, I was 13, 14 at the time. I really wanted David Freese to stay. David Freese was one of my idols, one of my heroes. So that trade hurt, not as much as Albert leaving, mind you, 3 years prior to that, but that trade really did hurt. But similar to Albert, David Freese is just such an awesome guy. And similar to Albert as well, he had a very nice reunion at one point whenever he came back as the Dodgers in his last at bat at Busch against Michael Wacha, who, ironically enough, Michael Wacha was the compensation pick the Cardinals got when Albert Pujols left. It's all connected. He had a home run off of Michael Wacha. I believe it was 2019, if memory serves correctly. But yeah, Freese is somebody that will forever live in Cardinal lore. I've actually not planned. I have the World Series DVD right on my desk right here. So it's something
Amazing.
that it's an incredible memory. And yeah, I think that there's an argument to say that David Freese's tenure in Los Angeles turned out better than Albert Pujols. Would you agree with that? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, sure, it was much shorter
Right.
lived.
It's harder to
I had
judge.
to look up the trade. If you're watching on the YouTube site, you probably saw me Googling like a madman. I completely forgot what the trade was. This is 8 years
I think
ago at this
Salas went
point.
over there, didn't he?
So yeah, that was a pretty good trade for the Angels. I don't know. It was pretty good for both sides. So it was Cardinals trade David Freese, Fernando Salas to Angels in exchange for Peter Borges and Randall Grichuk. Now,
That's right.
Grichuk obviously went on longer. Peter Borges, I believe, is coaching now. And then Grichuk obviously ended up playing in Toronto. and had a pretty decent career up in Toronto. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, Fernando Salas was one of the better middle relievers the Angels had for a while too. And then obviously David Freese was pretty darn good. We've seen some trades recently, even as far as recent as last year, getting Dexter Fowler to
Mhm.
Anaheim. Obviously, he ended up getting hurt. I was real bummed out because I always loved watching Dexter Fowler play when he was in
Mhm.
Colorado. I loved him in Chicago, and then when he came to Anaheim, I was like, oh, cool, dude. Like I've always liked Dexter Fowler as a dude. I
Mhm.
talk a lot about dudes here on this show and how much I like just
I
cool
like it.
guys being on
Mhm.
a team. Like, yes, obviously everyone wants to win, but if you're not going to win, at least have cool people on your team. And Dexter Fowler is one of those guys. Like, oh, this guy's just chill.
Yeah.
So I was excited, and then obviously ended up getting hurt and ended up being a season-ending injury, which was such a bummer. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Dexter Fowler's time in St. Louis was an odd one, to say the least. He had a tumultuous year. I think he batted 182 in 2017 or 18. I forgot to look up the stats, but it was really bad. He had a couple of really bad seasons. I don't think he meshed well with Mike Matheny. He didn't live up to the hype. And granted, he signed a 5-year contract when he was 32, so it's not like it was expected for him to light up the world. But I do think that he fell short of expectations. But also, as we saw with a couple other players, Colton Wong comes to mind. As soon as Mike Schultz took over, Fowler's numbers began to improve. And no matter what, whether he was struggling or doing well, you always saw a smile on Dexter Fowler's face.
yeah,
I didn't like him as much when he played for Chicago, not going to lie. But I have always liked Dexter Fowler. He seems like a guy that anybody could be a good teammate with. And again, another guy that I wasn't a huge fan of when he left, Jason Hayward. He and Jason Hayward seemed to have a lot of fun in Chicago and form a good friendship there before Fowler came back to St. Louis. So Dexter Fowler, yes, while the numbers might not have been what Cardinal fans wanted, I do think Dexter Fowler is a good person and had a good time in St. Louis. I don't mean to speak for him. Maybe he had an awful time. I don't know. If he did have an awful time, he sure seemed to hide it a lot really well and give the fans everything he had, which in my opinion, this is maybe not as pessimistic as the world really is, but if you give the fan base everything you can, you should be able to rest your head easy. And from the outside perspective, Dexter Fowler gave St. Louis everything he could, and I can guarantee you, if he would not have, I think it was an ACL tear, or ACL or Achilles, if he wouldn't have had
yeah.
that
It
season
was
engine,
leg. Yeah,
yeah, if he wouldn't have had that season-ending injury, I think Angels fans would have seen that as well. And again, not Mike Trout type numbers or anywhere close, but he would, like you say, would have been a good dude and somebody that you just want to have on your team. One more break in the conversation between Steve and myself because BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues to march through college bowls and the NFL playoffs are right around the corner. BetOnline is your number one spot for sports action this season. Head over to your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus. That is a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with the promo code LOCKED ON, LOCKEDON, locked on to receive that bonus. Whether it's basketball, football, NHL, boxing, UFC, or your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline is where the game starts.
let's shift the conversation. One last thing I wanted to talk about is the Cardinals 2021 season, and I'm sure that you will hash that over a trillion times during the offseason, especially in the lockout.
Yeah.
If it weren't for that run, man,
Mm-hmm.
then the Cardinals likely would have been disappointing like the Angels were. Now, I don't think that the Angels necessarily had the expectations as a organization like the Cardinals do, just like a perennial contender.
Mm-hmm.
But if it weren't for that run that the Cardinals had, like you were likely not going to make it like the Angels were. So
No.
that's where I wanted to draw some comparisons here is when it came to the deadline, the Yankees and the Angels were like one game apart or two games apart in the standings. Like it was ridiculously close. The
Mm-hmm.
numbers were almost identical. And the Yankees went for it. And the Yankees, for all the problems they went through, succeeded. They went for it. They
Playoff
got
push.
guys. They
Yeah.
they tried, and the Angels sat on their backs,
Mm-hmm.
right, and just watched it play out. And I get it. The Trout injury. I know that has a lot to play with it. Look at the Braves. So that's where I go. When it comes to deadline, I don't think it necessarily matters as much as who's contending at that moment. Would you agree or disagree?
Doesn't matter. I think it matters to who goes for it. I mean, you look at the
Well,
Braves. They
that's what
lost.
I'm saying. Like
Right.
in that scope, right? Like it shouldn't matter who's contending because you can go for it still, unless you're like 60 games out, right?
Right.
Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, unless you're the Pirates or the Orioles or the Rangers, right? But I
Yeah.
think that you bring up, I think you mentioned the Braves. That's a great example. They lost Ronald Acuna Jr. That's their Mike Trout. What did they do? They got Jock Peterson. They got Jorge Soler. They got Adam Duvall. They got Eddie Rosario. They made small moves and, in a way, went for it and won their division and won the World Series. So I think that you bring up a great point that just because you're X amount of games out, baseball is so weird. And I know this probably better than anybody as a Cardinal fan and follower. 2011, 2021, even 2020 when they made their run. Going back historically, 1964 they were at it. 1964 and 2011 are compared greatly in terms of great comebacks. Baseball's a long season. Even from July 31st to October 1st, that's a long time. A lot of things can happen. So I agree with your point. If teams really want to go for it, they can go for it. There's enough talent around Major League Baseball right now and enough smart people running organizations, especially at the team level, that if you want to go for it, you can go for it. And I did an episode the other day on what if the proposed 14-team expanded playoff had happened in 2021. I think that you see the Cardinals be more aggressive because they would only be 4.5 games out of a playoff spot rather than 5 games out of a playoff spot. But the Cardinals really got rewarded for 2 mediocre moves, John Lester and J.A. Happ, with an improbable run. And I think that when you're talking about expectations that you started this conversation off with, it's an interesting topic because if you look at the Cardinals' expectation on July 31st and the fact that they made the postseason, they met expectations. But if you go back further and talk about the expectations they had in February and March, especially after the Nolan Arenado deal, they did not meet those expectations whatsoever because they didn't win the division. That was their expectation once they got Nolan Arenado, was to win the division. Things didn't work out. The Brewers were better than I thought they were going to be. Flaherty got hurt. The offense struggled for the first part of the season. Bader was hurt. Things happen, right? But the expectation game is interesting because it's all about perspective as to when those expectations start. So I'm going to ask you, when you look at 2022, both the Cardinals and the Angels have already got some starting pitching. Angels getting Syndergaard, the Cardinals getting Steven Matz, 2 former Mets. Right now, as the time of this recording, December 22nd, 2021, what is the expectation for the Angels going into 2022? You can answer first as the team stands, and second, what your expectations are for after the lockout.
Expectations as a team, as the team, probably right now middling pack, second or third, with Stros and Mariners still ahead. I think they still feel like they're better than the Rangers. I still think that pitching wise, and then still better than Oakland, who is selling the farm. Fan base will continually tell you fourth place. And as far as my personal expectations, once they get out of this lockout, I think they make a hard push. If they're legit, if they're serious, and they put their money where their mouth is, they make a hard run at Carlos Rodon. I think that's a legitimate move that they're going to go for. If they don't get him, they try and sway Clayton Kershaw. If they don't get him, buy Joe Adele, buy Brandon Marsh. I think that's where they're at. But it's there's so many things that have to happen still. I still don't think they're a true contender. I think there are too many question marks and too many gambles on Noah Syndergaard, on Michael Lorenzen, on being legitimate and being serious contributors in the rotation that you have to have a lot of things go right, and that's without factoring in injuries right now. So those are all things that just have to go right. But I don't know, man. I feel like I've talked about this a trillion times. It's off-season stuff, man, and there's a lockout. You got to fill time, but
yeah. I saw you did an episode with Jeff Carr about talking about Luis Castillo. Do you think that that's more of a fallback option, or what do you think the options are with the Angels and Reds getting a deal there?
I still think that it's too high of an asking price. Jeff pitched me a trade that was utterly ridiculous. I'll leave a link to that in our episode description. It was like out of this world. It was like three or four first rounders. I was like, Kai, like, I don't care what trade values has to say. Like, there's a difference between value on paper and value as an organization. I was like, that is just not happening.
Yeah.
But this is a whole bunch of fun, man. We could talk for hours and hours and hours, and maybe we'll link back up once the season comes back around. Maybe once Albert Pujols does sign back with St. Louis, we'll see if that ends up turning into a thing. But Lucas Smith, thanks for joining us, and thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Much appreciated. Why don't you tell my listeners and followers where they can find you?
Yeah, at Steve Granado, and of course at Locked On Angels, and YouTube and all that stuff. It's everywhere. If you're listening to Locked On Cardinals, you can find Locked On Angels.
Absolutely. Yep. And I'm at LJ Fastball, as you can see on YouTube right here, if I'm pointing correctly. And at LJ LO_Cardinals on Twitter and Instagram. So best of luck to the Angels, Steve, and hope that the Angels are able to compete. And I think it should be an interesting AL West. I think that division intrigues me a lot, especially with the moves the Rangers made. I'm not saying it's going to be an AL East type division, but I think it could be a very competitive division and a fun division to watch.
We'll see, man. Fingers crossed.